right now, so I'm doing this all remotely. But just wanted to pop in. Seamus is right. We had a very big day today. The governor signed both of my bills around protecting kids on social media, the Safe for Kids Act and the New York Child Data Protection Act. This would regulate how social media apps could use algorithms to curate content for kids on their platforms, as well as restrict the ability of internet companies to collect personal data from minors for commercial purposes without their consent. Two really big things. We are the first state in the country to take this approach. Other states are looking to copy our efforts. California is working on an identical bills right now. So is West Virginia and Virginia. And in the absence of any federal legislation, which seems to be stalled for the time being, this could very quickly become the national standard, which is really exciting that it originated here in New York and that we helped get it across the finish line. The bills had the full support of the Attorney General and the governor, and I could not be prouder that the bills passed. We faced an enormous opposition campaign from the tech industry, and despite that, we were still successful. And I think it'll make a real big difference. I mean, this week, the Surgeon General said that social media apps should have warning labels because they're not safe. And just this afternoon, the Wall Street Journal put out an article documenting how Instagram was pushing sexualized content to 13-year-olds on their app. I mean, these apps have had plenty of years to get their act together and to do the right thing. They haven't, and they won't, because they profit handsomely from the status quo. They make billions of dollars off of this current system, and that's why they don't want to change anything. So despite all that opposition, we succeeded nevertheless. So I'm really proud of that effort and proud of that accomplishment. Other than that, as you all know, we're in campaign season, and so I know many of you have been out there for Joanne, and really want to thank you. We kicked off a rally this past weekend that I was at with you guys, and so I know we're doing everything we can these last few days to make sure that Joanne gets across the finish line. And then I'm doing the same thing in Bay Ridge with a couple of our district leader candidates who are facing a stiff challenge from a county-backed operation as well. And then, obviously we'll turn our attention to the fall as we always do. And so with that, I'll stop there. Thank you all.
Great. Thank you, Senator. Do you have a moment or two for a question or one or two?
I always have a moment or two for questions, as long as they're not too hard and that I already know the answer.
Anyone have any questions? Questions for Senator Gianardis? Jane, unmute yourself. Jane, you have to unmute yourself.
I want to say congratulations. I'm thrilled with the progress that you've made. And I look forward to further supporting you. Yes, you're welcome.
Thank you, Jane.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Art?
I also want to say congratulations, Andrew. I think those are tremendous accomplishments.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Takes team effort, but I'm glad it was worth spending all of the time and effort we did this year on that.
Greg.
Hi, thank you, and congratulations again, Senator. You know I'm proud. This is a big win for our kids. Can you walk us through the next steps, specifically what penalties companies may face and any efforts the state attorney general might make to block these algorithms, period, rather than flagging them?
So the next 6 months, the attorney general is going to be issuing regulations outlining how the companies need to comply with the requirements of the act. And basically, it's just going to require the companies to use what's called in the industry commercially reasonable methods of age verification to determine when a user is, under 18 or not. These are methods that the apps are already by and large doing already for their own internal compliance purposes. For example, like it doesn't serve Instagram any good if their algorithm is showing 16-year-old users content that's better suited for a 13-year-old. That means that they're not maximizing their ability to monetize these kids. And so they've perfected their own systems really well. 9.9 uncertainty. So the AG is going to issue these regulations over the next 6 months. Then the act will go into effect. Every instance of violation will be met with a violation of up to $50,000 per violation. Practically speaking, that might not sound like a lot for a big tech company, but it actually is, because these apps they're not going to have the algorithm running for just one user as opposed to the billions of others, right? This is going to force them to change their practices across the board for youth users. And so really, if they're not adhering to the requirements of the law, they're going to be facing fines on the scale of the millions, if not tens of millions or hundreds of millions. So we feel like it's very strong teeth that are in place here, and that the AG is more than capable of enforcing this act. The AG, by the way, our AG, Tish, is leading a 45-state effort lawsuit against Meta for willfully misleading users in terms of the harmful side effects of their apps and of intentionally designing their algorithm with addictive qualities intentionally in order to keep people hooked on their screens longer. And for those that don't know, I know we all use Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and TikTok in different ways, and we might have different remembrances of when they first came out versus what they are today. Facebook today and Instagram today is not what it used to be 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago for Facebook. It's, especially for young users, it's pretty bad. There was one story a family shared with me. They actually shared with me a video of their son's feed, TikTok feed. Their son was 16 years old, sadly took his life 2 years ago, and was going through some, depression issues and some vulnerability issues, like all 16-year-olds do, right? And the TikTok feed, the first video was a rainy scene with somber music, and the narrator was saying, if you're only having good days some of the days, is it really worth it? And then the next video right after that was, if you feel like you can't go on, just remember all it takes is 4 tablespoons of salt, which is literally a how-to guide for self-harm and suicide, followed by other videos of the same like. And so this is not about following your friends and following your family and catching up with old schoolmates and following the Taylor Swift fan page or the this or the that. But what's going on social media for young kids is pretty bad, which is why the Surgeon General has been so out there and adamant that it's not safe for kids. And all this would do is it would turn the algorithm off by default. A parent could turn the algorithm back on for a full experience. But we think, based on everything we've heard from parents and young people, that once these kids experience a non-algorithmic feed, and that they can see the content that they want to see, not the content that the apps want them to see, they're actually going to have a much better experience.
Well, thank you.
Any other questions? Got any hands up? Well, I, for one, would like actually if the bill would have also included people over the age of 18, because I hate the algorithmic feeds, but yeah, can't win everything.
Actually, it was, I'll tell you, if I can just take one more minute, Seamus, I heard that from a lot of people, and myself included. The reality is we had to structure the law in a way to withstand legal scrutiny, because we're going to get sued by the tech companies. We know it. And the data on kids is so much stronger than for any other age group, because kids' minds, even at teenagers, their brains are still developing and they're still vulnerable in so many ways, that the data is so much stronger for that demographic. And we have to show, to survive legal scrutiny, that the remedy we're proposing is linked directly to the harm being caused. And the strongest correlation of that is for young users under the age of 18. So my view is, let's start here. Let's win this one. And then we'll come back later and work on the other stuff later on.
Certainly a good high note to end on. Thank you so much, Senator.
Thank you all very much.
Okay. So we have one piece of old business. As I mentioned at our last meeting, there was a resolution that was passed through the executive board in support of the street vendors. The sponsor of it did ask that we table it until this meeting so she could speak on it if necessary. So uh, the the resolution's text was disseminated by email today and also back on Tuesday. So with that, the chair will entertain a motion to adopt said resolution. Okay, motion by Steve, second by Greg. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your Zoom hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Chair hears one nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Okay. So I don't think our speaker is here yet, so we'll just jump around our agenda just a tiny bit. Yeah. Greg, you have your hand raised?
My battery's going to die. I could do a quick UFT update if anybody cares. But I will say that the blue ribbon topic went to Andrew Gennardis.
If you want to give a quick update with UFT, go for it.
Sure, thank you. Well, we completed, the budget season, and obviously we're trying to make the class size law reality by making sure that the money is afforded to the city from both the state and that the mayor doesn't have the right to reallocate those funds to other things. That's what's been so problematic. We don't want it to turn into an unfunded mandate. So the class size law is trying to become reality. That's a key thing. We just wrapped up our in-district committee of 100, in which our district representatives meet with all city council members and discuss our legislative priorities. And we have some major issues regarding the air conditioning and the need for reducing the excessive heat in our buildings. So that's what we're working on. That's basically it. Like I said, I anticipated that Andrew was going to come and tell you all about the legislation, but I'm just psyched about that. The governor signed the bill at our headquarters today, and I was absolutely thrilled. So that's a big win for us, as the school year closes out. I'll take any questions if anybody has anything.
Any questions for Greg? Anyone has any questions? Or Joan?
I wanted to know what if anything is happening with the universal school for 3-year-olds, because I know that's been on the chopping block, right?
Yeah, that's a great question, Joan. Thank you. It has definitely been an issue for us. We're trying to get that money from the council. We've had our budget hearings. We've been pushing. We've been getting a lot of support. And as far as I'm concerned, it's not done yet. We still want that money so that folks still have the option of pre-K and 3K. We want every single dollar restored. You may have noticed a few weeks ago, some of the mayor's budget cuts were scaled back, but 3K and pre-K were then moved to the front of the line as cuts that had not been restored. So we're still working on that. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
My pleasure, especially as someone who benefited from 3K and pre-K as a father. I can tell you this is one of the best things that this town has done in a long time. You even have, as my students, some of whom are strident conservatives, my undergraduates, will rail against the de Blasio era. Then they'll come up for air and they'll say, but that 3K, that pre-K, I have to admit, I benefited from it. Good policy is good politics, and that's a great example, and every kid should benefit from it.
Any other questions for Greg? Okay, thanks so much.
Thanks.
As Vicky mentioned in the chat, I think I'm not gonna embarrass her with us all singing happy birthday, but I I'd like to extend the club's warm happy birthday wishes to our former Assemblywoman Joan Millman. So
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Joan.
Thank you,
I'm sorry I
everyone.
didn't say it,
Happy
but I have the floor
birthday.
to answer your question. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
yes. Yes.
It's so much better to have them than not, right?
Amen to that.
Yes, for sure.
Okay. So we still have some time before our speaker is here. Our speaker has just arrived, actually.
I don't know. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Elizabeth, are you available yet?
Yeah, great to see everyone.
Okay. Yeah, we can, if you're ready, we can turn it over to you.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
Just sorry, it's just to give a quick primer, as everyone knows, the governor decided to pull a fast one a little over a week ago and basically suspended or postponed indefinitely congestion pricing. And so Elizabeth Adams, who's certainly no stranger to this club, is certainly been at the forefront. And any of you who is a nerd and listens to 1010 Wins has definitely heard her on many interviews as of late. And so we're here to hear about like what can be done and sort of like the whole situation.
Great. Thanks, Seamus, and thank you all so much for having me. And thank you to Assembly Member and Susanna and all the members. Great to see you. So we'll share a little bit of kind of what's happened, what's going on with congestion pricing. Folks may be following, but just to kind of get all of us up to speed, and then we can share a little bit about kind of what actions people are taking and opportunities, and would love to just open up to questions that folks have and what people are interested in discussing, and we can go from there. All right, so congestion pricing, which I imagine folks are quite familiar with by this point, is really the biggest transportation policy change that we've had in over a generation. It would invest in public transit. It would reduce climate pollution significantly by having fewer cars on the road, and it will allow us to redesign our streets to have better walking, biking, accessibility. And so the nuts and bolts of congestion pricing is it's a tolling program that says if you want to drive into the central business district below 60th Street, you would need to pay a toll to do so during the peak hours when congestion is its worst. New York City is the most congested city in the entire United States. So it's really a prime candidate for a program like this. Congestion pricing has been implemented in cities around the world, London, Singapore, Stockholm, Milan, and it's been hugely successful. So we have a lot of really great models for cities that we can turn to. In terms of the program specifics, it's at $15 during the day for the toll. It's significantly reduced at night, 75% cheaper than during peak hours. And there's exemptions if you make less than $50,000. You have an exemption, emergency vehicles, people with disabilities. So it's really focusing on commuters driving in to the city. And we look at the numbers in New York City. The vast majority of people who commute into the central business district for work, or people who are kind of generally getting into the city, do so by public transit. Only about 3% of New Yorkers commute in by car. And yet we have such significant congestion. So a lot of the vehicles that are actually on our road in Manhattan are vehicles from outside of the 5 boroughs, from Long Island, Westchester, New Jersey. And what congestion pricing would do, as we've seen from models elsewhere, is it would reduce as many as over 100,000 cars a day. So the vehicles that really do need to get in, if someone is taking a sick family member or emergency service vehicles like ambulances, all of those vehicles that really need to be on the street and move quickly would be able to do so at a much better speed. We've seen, especially in the last 10 years, traffic rates, the speed of which traffic moves has significantly dropped. So we're at kind of the highest point of congestion right now. So when we talk about emergency vehicles and things like that, we're really doing harm by continuing to not address this problem. A little bit just from the Brooklyn perspective, the benefits that we see of how it's good for outer boroughs is reports have shown that congestion and traffic would drop about 16%, also outside of the congestion zone neighborhoods. So where, I know a lot of folks live just on the other side of the bridge. The models and the reports that we've seen would say that traffic would actually be reduced there too. People wouldn't come and parked and head in. So it would be, as we're expecting, around Brooklyn and Queens would help out there too. And then really, at Transportation Alternatives, the organization that I work with, really the reason that we're advocating for this is because we know how important this is for public transit, for the vast majority of New Yorkers who depend on the public transit system, which needs, a significant influx of funding, as well as for safer streets everywhere that congestion pricing has gone through. We've seen a reduction in traffic crashes and traffic fatalities, and really improvements on safer streets overall, as well as cleaner air. So when we have fewer cars on the road, as expected, we have cleaner air, we have less air pollution. And so really, as we're thinking long-term for the future of our city, congestion pricing is a program that has really checked off a lot of those boxes. So happy to talk through that a little bit more if folks have questions. But I'd want to do a little bit of kind of where we are now, what the governor has done, and what's ahead. So as Seamus said, beginning of June, just about 2 weeks ago now, 3 weeks before the program was set to turn on, when everything was ready to go, the infrastructure had been put up, years of staff time had gone into this. $500 million had already been spent on getting the logistics set up, getting the rollout going. Just a couple weeks prior to this program turning on, the governor announced an indefinite pause. And I don't know about you, but indefinite pause to me sounds very likelihood of kind of no return promised. So very, very concerning to a lot of people in a lot of different ways, and particularly the MTA, which is counting on this, right? There are a lot of projects that were in motion, that were moving forward. The Second Avenue subway, for example, had billions in federal matching dollars for the project. All of that really halted, put on the chopping block because of this about-face 11th hour decision that was completely unilateral. Congestion pricing was a law passed by the state legislature. We have, we have multiple branches of government. So the legislature passed this law 5 years ago and was set to roll out. And so the governor kind of upended multiple systems of government here. And then that really put kind of the MTA funding be in a compromising position, because part of the congestion pricing program requires $1 billion each year in a locked box that cannot be touched for the MTA, for our public transit system. So without this $15 billion that is revenue from the congestion pricing program, the MTA's funding is thrown up in upheaval. There are huge questions of that. So just with a couple of days left in the state legislative session, governor proposed a couple alternative MTA funding plans. I have to say it really showed how kind of last minute and out of the blue this idea came, because her first proposal was a payroll mobility tax, which would have been a tax on small businesses, a tax on New Yorkers, and specifically New York City residents, right? So currently, congestion pricing would be a toll for the individuals driving into the city, by and large, people from suburbs, people from outside the 5 boroughs. And here the governor is now proposing a tax or a charge to all New York City and to just New York City residents, which is completely unequal and puts that at risk. So the state legislature shut that down pretty quickly. Thank you to the assembly member. And the second proposal she put forth was just kind of like an IOU. We'll take $1 billion a year from the general fund. It's not, dedicated to be untouched, or it's just kind of a promise that they would take $1 billion from the general fund each year, which of course raises the question of if you're just saying you're going to take $1 billion each year, what are you taking it from? So pulling it from schools, from childcare, from healthcare services, things that are also very essential to New Yorkers. And so putting people's well-being at risk, livelihood at risk by this last-minute decision is, terrible policy, and really is something that, is compromises when we had already had an agreed upon program moving forward. So the legislature didn't move that forward as well, and gabbled out of session last week. So leaves us kind of, that's where we come to now. And so I'm happy to kind of talk about what's next. There are some lawsuits being considered because of the governor's action, but the impacts are already starting to be felt. So the MTA just said that what they're planning for this summer, without this $1 billion dedicated each year, means they have to reevaluate all their projects. They have to reduce planned transit improvements. They have to reduce accessibility planned improvements. And these are all things that are vital to the millions and millions of New Yorkers who take our public transit each year. Part of the reason congestion pricing moved forward in the first place was after that summer of hell in 2018, right? When transit riders got together and said, we deserve better. We deserve a transit system that works for all of us. And it needs to be funded. So we certainly don't want to go back to summer of hell or back to that, an underservice of transit improvements for people. So people are mobilizing very quickly. If you've made calls to the governor's office, thank you. Please keep doing so. The next steps are the MTA board will be meeting on the 26th of June next week. And then the 30th is when the program was slated to turn on. So we'll see what happens there. So I'll pause. I'll see. I see Arthur has a question, and we'll start there, and then Susanna.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned the MTA board. Excuse me. Is that the most realistic step that's being taken? I'm sorry. Is that the most realistic step that's being taken to overturn the governor's decision, or are there others?
So there's a few so far, and the assembly member, I'm curious if feel free to add of kind of what you're seeing as well. So the MTA board, is somewhat independent from the governor, more so than the State Department of Transportation, which is an agency in the executive branch. So they approved this, they voted on it to move it forward. I think there is a question of a delay or a pause versus cancellation, but the MTA board we see as having a role here, that they approved moving this forward. They are tasked with having this implemented. So we would encourage them next week to vote to affirm to move this forward and really step aside from the governor here. The other, to your question, the other kind of avenue that we're seeing is some attorneys are looking at potential lawsuits. The New York City comptroller last week held a press conference bringing together some attorneys, saying they see multiple opportunities for lawsuits here. One, in terms of ADA accessibility, the accessibility improvements that are planned for the subway elevators, for kind of general ADA accessibility improvements. Those projects are compromised now because they're capital projects that were going to be funded by the capital lockbox of congestion pricing. So there is a potential lawsuit there. The second that we're hearing a potential for a lawsuit is around the state's Climate Protection Act. It is a very hot week, as we all know. We are only going to continue to see heat surface temperatures rising, the impacts of climate change in our city if we do not make significant changes to our climate policy and reduce climate emissions. And vehicles actually in New York statewide are the transportation is the number 2 cause of climate emissions. So the first is buildings, second is transportation. So we really need to shift to more sustainable modes of transportation. And so people are looking at the Climate Protection Act as a potential lawsuit for not advancing climate policy. And then the third that I've heard is around the MTA board of saying that they are tasked with this $1 billion per year dedicated program, and that they might have standing here. So I think all of those are being examined, pursued. I'm not an attorney, but if you know any potential great plaintiffs who would be impacted, we're looking into those too. Susanna?
Hi, thank you so much for coming. And Elizabeth came pretty last minute, and I know, so appreciate that, and has been working nonstop on this. So really, thank you for that. I heard some folks, the governor and other folks talking about how one of the reasons that she stopped doing, put the pause on it, was because of the poll numbers and public support. But, people were calling our office nonstop in support of this. And I heard that, this has happened in other cities, that before it goes into effect, it's not as popular, and then it changes. So just wondering if you could talk about that. I mean, nobody wants to, pay money, but there's a lot of good reasons. So just wondering if you, what we've seen from other cities in terms of that change in support of it once it's rolled out.
Yeah, thanks. What happened is exactly very common. It's actually termed the Valley of Death of the weeks before the implementation of congestion pricing in other cities. Public opinion is kind of at its lowest. Change is hard. There's questions, right? No one wants to pay an added fee. All understandable, feelings and thoughts. So that's always kind of when that hesitation around it on public opinion is at the highest. And this is what happens, right? When we do big things and enact large scale change, it raises questions. So in every other city, we've seen this kind of public opinion dip a little bit. And then what's actually quite impressive is in all of those places, the opinion polling shot up pretty soon after. Policies usually take a year or two before they settle in. But in places like London, we saw even after just 2 or 3 months, the opinion rose quite significantly. Once it went into effect, once people started to see the results of, oh, there are 20% less cars on the road. Oh, I am able to move around. Oh, I am able to breathe a little bit more. The air is, you're starting to see those results. And this is also why we advocate so strongly for, what New York City DOT should be doing with that space, right? When there are fewer cars going in, let's have more dedicated busways. Let's have more green space. Let's make sure our city is walkable and accessible as possible. So when that happens in these cities, you really see, how quickly the opinion has turned around, which we see really as a testament to why things like this are important, especially in cities that are so congested like New York.
Any other questions? Oh, Jane? Jane, you gotta unmute.
Yeah. Now it's okay? You can hear me?
Yeah.
I was wondering, maybe you addressed this and I missed it, But how are taxi cabs going to be handled going over the Brooklyn Bridge, for example?
Yeah, so taxi cars
Or
are
Uber?
separate. Yeah, it's there's the for hire vehicles, the Uber and Lyfts are treated a little bit differently from the yellow taxis. But they will have a fee of a $1.25 for going into the congestion pricing zone. So there will be for the for hire vehicles. So there will be a small fee there too.
$1.25, is that each way?
For going in, yeah.
And coming out? Well, yes, okay. Sometimes these Ubers and Lyfts and even taxis are transporting handicapped people. Will some allowance be made for that, even though the amount is small?
That's a good question. I'm not sure on the Uber and Lyft, but it will the disability exemption is based on the person. So I imagine a person could file a claim individually for like a reimburse for the tax exemption.
Thank you. Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for coming to our meeting. As someone who is opposed to congestion pricing, I think one of the reasons I was opposed to it is that I thought that $15 was exorbitant because it certainly has a negative effect on working people like firemen, cops, nurses, teachers who need to drive into the city because of where because of the hours of work and where their places of employment are located. And also, I thought that the $35 to charge a truck to come in only gets passed on to consumers. That's what happens. The people who pay more for food, for goods and services. Have you considered possibly proposing a compromise where the pricing would be lowered to, let's say, $5 or $7.50, so something to drive in, something not so exorbitant that really hurts people? Is that part of a compromise that you're considering?
So in terms of the kind of impact on individuals, I very much hear you. The exemptions that were put into the final program are if you make 50,000 or less, you don't pay you're exempt from the $15. If you make more than that and are a cop or a teacher, yes, you would pay. But when you look at the numbers, it really is compared to the amount of people who are wealthy driving into the city is vastly, vastly different. You're really talking about 3% of New Yorkers who commute in via car. And the vast majority of those are high income. So it's not a perfect right? There are individuals that you're talking about, right, that would be impacted, but it is by and large much more equitable, especially when you think about the fact that 97% of New Yorkers commuting in are doing so via public transit. And it's really important that we make sure that they have the service that is to the degree that it needs to be, that their train is on time, that their buses work. So anyway, so there's that. But I would say to your question of a compromise, what we've also heard and seen from other cities is put the program in place, give it 6 months, and then tweak as needed, right? If we start a program with an exemption here or an exemption there, you're never going to get it off the ground. And if you start with too low of a toll, right? If you start at $5 or $3, you're not really shifting the incentive. So what we want to do is we want 20% less vehicles driving in. That's how we reduce congestion. And so we want to make sure that there is a threshold that incentivizes people to make a different choice. I was talking to someone a little bit ago who lived in South Brooklyn, who was like, I guess now I'll take the ferry. Didn't really want to take the ferry, right? But that's great. You're creating an incentive to choose a different transit option. So for all of the people that's possible and doable, we want to make sure that there is the threshold that it actually shifts behavior. So in that, I would say after implementation, other cities and other localities have tweaked it from there. But really the most important is getting the program going, getting it up and running, and then, adjusting here or there as needed.
So then you wouldn't be in favor of lowering the $15 for cars for commuters or regular folks and $35 for trucks, because you really didn't answer the question of the effect that this would have on consumer goods in Manhattan and also businesses in Manhattan, small businesses in Manhattan, where people like to come in and maybe they'll purchase goods, maybe they'll go to a department store or a clothing store, and instead, well, would stay home instead of paying the go to the suburbs, saying $15. I mean, there's got to be a compromise, and it doesn't sound like you want to consider that.
No, I mean, we want to move forward with the program. I will say, the data and research we've seen around the economic reason and the impact is currently the economic reports that we've seen is that we are currently costing New Yorkers about $20 billion annually in traffic congestion, over $9 billion in travel time costs, in operating and vehicle costs. So it's actually beneficial for small businesses. It's beneficial for our economy to have traffic moving faster, more efficiently, that trucks aren't stuck in traffic, that it doesn't take them 6 hours to stop and do deliveries. And that's really, it's actually, we've seen it be quite beneficial when it comes to businesses and economic needs.
Thanks for your answer.
Of course, I unmuted myself. Time for about 2 or 3 more questions. Greg?
Hey, thank you. Forgive me, Steve took many of my questions, and concerns, but I don't know if we heard enough about the medical issue. When this was being debated, the president of Memorial Sloan Kettering came out against it, and one of the reasons was he was deeply concerned about patients who were receiving regular treatment, particularly chemotherapy, having to ride on the train, and the effects of nausea and other effects that would make this very difficult, to say nothing of the financial impact. So I'm wondering, and forgive me if this was already covered, are there any exceptions for medical conditions like that in the legislation and in the policy as it stands right now?
Not for an individual with who's not with a disability. But what I would say is what we've heard around medical needs is currently emergency service vehicles have a very hard time moving through the congestion zone quickly. So if someone has a medical emergency and is in an ambulance or trying to get to a hospital, they're currently at pretty significant risk because traffic moves at 4 to 7 miles an hour. Traffic in the Central Business District is the slowest in the country, and it is only getting slower. So around the medical needs, what we've really heard on the ambulance, on the emergency service side, is that there's quite a lot of benefits for people's health and well-being by rolling this out. And then also, I would just say, the vast majority of people do take public transit, and people are currently on the subway and in buses with medical needs and medical conditions. And it's really important that we also make sure that they're not stuck in delays and that they're with a subway service that works. To be able to
okay, I have to express some skepticism there when compared to the president of Memorial Sloan Kettering, because I think he understands his patient population. But I see your point. The only thing I would also ask about is, or point out, is that we may need some type of civil servant exemption, simply because a lot of teachers whom I represent have been priced out of most of the city. So they are commuting from Long Island, Westchester, New Jersey, and this as a result causes them to incur a tremendous cost just by commuting daily. So I'm wondering if there's been any discussion of civil servant exemptions for that particular purpose, maybe even if it was income-based, but not starting at $50,000 and below.
Yeah, so there's not currently a civil service exemption. We do also encourage police officers to take public transit and for people to take transit in if you're coming from elsewhere. But yeah, and then there is an income level exemption. And look, I agree with you on people being priced out. I would say, you know, there's a lot we should do in New York City around affordable housing, around making it more accessible for people to live in the city without being priced out in a whole lot of ways. So thanks.
Okay, I would only, and this is my final point because there are other people waiting to speak. I don't represent police officers, but I would point out that people who know police officers will tell you that police officers are regularly instructed to stay off of public transit to reduce the likelihood of running into someone they may have apprehended in the past and encouraging conflict. Now, I'm just saying that's the reality of it. I'm not saying one way or the other that civil servants, starting with cops, have to be prioritized. But these are the realities that these folks face. So I hope that we can continue to have the conversation about how to consider the perspective of the civil servant. But thanks.
Thank you.
Bridget and then Matt. Bridget, you have to unmute on your computer, I think.
Unmute. Okay. I would just like to point out, in follow-up to what Greg's point was, frequently police officers during the course of their assignments for the day are moved to other locations, and the most efficient way for them to get to that other location is using their own car. But I have, my problem is as a Brooklynite, there is a huge flaw with the access on the Brooklyn Bridge. If you are going northbound off the bridge to the FDR Drive, no problem. If you are going southbound, you have to go approximately 70 feet on city streets, and you get nailed for $15 for that. There's a similar problem on the 59th Street Bridge, and there is no access to the 59th Street Bridge if you want to go eastbound into Queens, that comes off 2nd Avenue. If you're coming in town, you can get off at 61st Street if you know how to do it. That's my, so there are major league technical flaws in the mapping. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks. Matt?
So it seems to me that the decision that the governor made was less about, her liking the policy, but more about trying to preserve congressional seats in the suburbs. And that's really what's driving her here. And as much as we all want to go after her about, oh, it's good for the city, it's good for the city, we need this for the city, we need this for the city, it doesn't seem like that's really what's driving her thinking here. And it won't be driving her thinking until November. So I'm just curious what you think we can do using that reality of the politics behind this, of her trying to salvage some Congress seats out of Long Island, trying to keep Tom Suozzi in office, trying to keep the winner of Latimer versus Bowman in the office, knowing that that's probably really what's driving her, not anything about what she cares about congestion pricing. What do you think we really should be doing here? Or is this just a lost cause until November when the House shuffles the way it's going to shuffle?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, I mean, I think my read was this was a political decision calculation that she made. And I think it's really on all of us to show that she made the wrong one. Not only do we need strong policies that are climate centered, that improve sustainability in New York, but also the governor doesn't just get to write her own set of rules. And I think it's really important that New Yorkers come out and say, look, we had a law that passed. We have a governance structure. You have a whole MTA board. You've done hearings. There was a, environmental review. The federal government signed off on this, the state, the city, for you to make an 11th hour political decision. I think in addition to the fact that, we need to move forward congestion pricing, I think it is a really dangerous precedent for a governor to do, and I think very short-sighted, right? It is putting a 11-week window in front of her for New Yorkers, compromising people's, next 10, 20, 30 years of well-being. And I think that voters see that or are upset about that, right? And the response that we've seen come out has been very swift. As Susanna said, there have been countless calls to their office. We're hearing this from legislators across the city, from members and senators who told us we've never had more calls on anything. And so I think it's really important that people make their voice heard and say, you think of this as a political calculation. Well, you're now in a really politically bad spot because you look weak. You look like you went against your own government. You went against New Yorkers. I hear you're talking about Long Island.
But
Yeah.
she's not looking at it from her own politics. She's looking at it from the point of view of I have to preserve these specific seats. Hakeem Jeffries is looking to become Speaker of the House, and he's probably in her ear about this and everything that we're talking about here in the city. I don't think she's going to listen to that. So I'm just questioning, how do we break through that noise? And also, I'm going to steal Alyssa's comment from the chat just so it gets in front of you. And how do we make sure that this isn't done on an election year again, so that whoever is good doesn't take these political questions here? Because everything you're saying is right. Everyone in New York is against it. Everyone in Joanne Simon's office is getting nothing but calls. Everyone in Andrew's office is getting nothing but calls in favor. She's not caring about that right now. So I'm just curious, is there anything we can do if she's so focused on saving the votes of seats on Long Island, not caring about what's going on in the city of New York?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and to Alyssa's question, I mean, I think if they had done it a little more planning, right? Like you make decisions earlier than, at the 11th hour, and upend everything. But, I think in terms of I would urge people to also call their Congress members and kind of all levels here. I think, this is really a national issue at this point. We are starting to see more Congress members come out, speak out. Congressmember Espaillat, I think just today, Jerry Nadler. There's been a few folks, Goldman, who've been vocal on it. I think her action also is making it a referendum on the Democratic Party, right? Is this how you govern? Is this how you choose to operate? Which I think has political implications across the board. And I hope that the people who put the pressure here, are starting to see that this looks bad for this type of behavior. It looks bad for Democrats across the board. But yeah, I mean, look, I can't speak to the few Long Island members, but if there are other folks at play, like Jeffries or Schumer, people like that, I think the more that we put pressure here politically and make this a national issue, then it becomes an issue in November, whether they want it or not, right? Like they're past the point of being able to say like we'll delay this and it'll be fine, because I think it's seen as such a like putting your foot in a mouth, like embarrassing political decision, even beyond the policy itself. Like I've heard from people in California, it's kind of moving around. So I would say from the pushing on the governance piece too. But yeah.
Last question, Joanne.
Hi. So it's not so much a question as it is an observation. I think Elizabeth, you articulated what I think is the biggest issue here. The biggest problem with the timing is that it really looks bad to have done this in the way that she did it. And so while there are people who even are not fans of congestion pricing, recognize that this doesn't help, right? If you were worried about the politics, you walked right into a trap, right? You made yourself less effective. You look like you are a rookie, right? And I think that's the big problem. The other thing is what people are willing to negotiate. There's really the legislation, and by the way, there is an exemption in the legislation for the disability community who is precluded from using most of the subway system, as you know. And buses don't go very well from one borough to the other. In Brooklyn doesn't have any buses now to Manhattan except express buses. but it all went to the Transit Review Mobility Board that conducted the hearings. So a lot of these decisions that people are talking about were the decisions of the Transit Review Mobility Board that they were then recommended to the MTA and were accepted. I could think of a whole host of things I would change. I think that there could have been a way, we knew about the polling changing dramatically. Part of it is inflation, part of it is post-COVID trauma, et cetera. That could have been dealt with in the budget, right? We could have talked about this and found a way, if that was necessary, to delay it a bit in order to get past the election and then do it, right? So the biggest problem I see, and what I'm hearing from people, is that the way it was done is really the biggest problem. And of course, the other conversations that were initially proposed, which really we never had anything to vote on, we never had a bill, if anything, we never had any language, was basically, well, what about this, what about that kind of thing. And none of it addresses congestion. And congestion is the reason we're doing this. And by the way, trucks pay more on the New Jersey Turnpike, on the Thruway. Big trucks pay more because they damage the roads more, they have more axles. That's what congestion pricing is, peak and off-peak. It's cheaper at night, but it's going to be more expensive for a truck than for somebody driving a sedan. And so I think it's important to understand some of those things that are, not really all that different than any other kind of toll. I too am not crazy about the going on to the FDR Drive directly, but we would never have gotten the bill passed if we hadn't done that. So that was part of a compromise to get the legislation passed in the first place. There are tweaks that can be made, and I think that is something that we would anticipate. But right now we have to figure out what path exists to shore up the MTA, because I think most people are seeing this as just killing the program. And if that's the case, then we really need to fall back and punt to figure out another way to reduce congestion. And I would also point out that the MTA is already under a consent decree from the disability community to make the subways accessible. So that exists, you just have to enforce the consent decree.
Well, with that, thank you so much, Elizabeth. It really was very insightful. If anyone has any other questions, how can they help out or ask questions or reach out, whatever?
Thank you. Yeah, this was great. Really appreciate all the questions. Always here to talk through any more. If people want to take actions, call the governor or get involved, encourage you all to go to transalt.org/action. That will lead to you to kind of all the latest things that we're doing. Transalt.org/action. And also feel free to email me anytime. I'll put my email in the chat as well. And thank you. It's always great being here with you all.
Can I make one other comment? Because I know that people are concerned even locally. 50% of the congestion in downtown Brooklyn and the neighborhoods immediately adjacent to it in South, right, are avoiding the toll on the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. There was a blueprint study done almost 20 years ago that established that 50% of the vehicular traffic in downtown Brooklyn, and consequently the neighborhoods coming up, right, is induced by the free bridges. That's the main reason why I have been in favor of congestion pricing, because we are suffering from that congestion in downtown Brooklyn and the entire area.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm not sure what you said, Joanne, because you're muted, but whatever.
I just muted myself. I just said I'll shut up now.
Oh. Okay, just a few final things before we call it a night. This is sort of one item of news. as some of you may recall, we spearheaded a letter to State Democratic Party Chairman Jay Jacobs, asking for support on the ERA. That was sent out on May 29th. I actually snail mailed it as well as we had it publicly posted and all that. And actually did get the rise because City and State did pick it up. So, and by sheer coincidence, at the state party meeting up in Albany on the 29th, there was a discussion made about from a committee member from Queens asking about like what is the state party doing to help. They got sort of a non-answer on that, so we have sort of helped light the flame on everything. So, and with that also, as some people may have heard, last night, the appellate division announced that the ERA is back on the ballot. For the lawyers in the room, they will find this funny. The plaintiffs in the case actually waited too long to file an Article 78 in the case. Because obviously no one seems to know how to count to 4 months. To quote Stephen Colbert, calendars have a well-known liberal bias. Then just a few final things, or actually no, Hal, your hand up.
Yeah, just 3 minutes of your time. Just a quick update on the buses going to other districts and states. The $750 that I think we've been authorized will go to set up a fundraiser for which all of the money necessary to rent the buses will come. That fundraising event will be in July. I'm going to a meeting tomorrow. We'll get more information, which I'll relay right away to the club about that. So things are moving along in terms of getting the buses. That's it.
Great. Thank you, Hal. As Senator Gennardis mentioned earlier, we had a big rally on Saturday at Borough Hall, and then afterward we did a canvass for Joanne. As I'm sure everyone knows, she is in the midst of a primary fight, which we know we will win because this team is phenomenal. We had probably about 30 people show up. As Jason Shelley actually mentioned to me privately, the photo actually that we posted on Instagram actually didn't even show as many people as we had there. So we had to cut people off. So positive problem to have. But of course, there is still a lot of ways to get involved to help reelect Joanne. Poll site visibility. We have a phone bank coming up on Monday, and then of course stuff on election day. And just with that, I'm going to turn things over to Susanna, since she can probably speak to this a lot better than I can.
Great. Well, I'll be pretty quick, and I know Karina, Joanne's campaign coordinator, has been in touch with a lot of you. We just wanted to say also thank you, because people have been so great. Seamus has been phenomenal helping Joanne. So many of the members here, from back to getting Joanne on the ballot during petitioning. Just like everything you all have done is so appreciated. And we hope that you come with us on Tuesday night at Someday Bar and watch the results come in and celebrate and have a little time with one another to enjoy the evening, I hope. So yes, as you know, Joanne has an opponent. You might have seen some unsavory mailings that he sent out about Joanne, because Joanne has done a lot. And when you haven't done a lot in service of your community, it's very easy to go on the attack of somebody else. But the best ways for you all to help are to come to Monday night's phone bank. At that night, we're going to be calling people who live in inaccessible buildings. They have a door person, we couldn't get in, things like that. So we're hoping to have a very large final phone bank Monday night. If you'd like to help get out the word at any early poll site on Saturday, that would be great. And also Monday, if you don't like doing phone banks, we are going to some subway stations to just flyer to people as they're going home for the evening. This is going to be a really sleepy election and low turnout. So besides kind of the phone bank, really, if you can text or call or email 3 of your friends, that would be awesome, because that is really what matters, is just talking to some of your friends and talking to some of your neighbors. So I put the link for the Monday Night Phone Bank, and Seamus also put the link for the poll site visibility. Again, Karina has probably been in touch with you, but we would very much appreciate any other time that you can give. And we also have posters. So if you have a local grocery store or bodega, we can get one to you and you can hang it up there, or you can hang it up in your window. And just again, want to say thank you so much for all of your time and your support. Y'all are just really incredible. Just wanted to thank you. And Joanne, did I miss anything? You're here. Maybe there's something you want to add.
I would also say that for some of you, have been door knockers and stuff, and I was out today, and tomorrow's supposed to be hotter. It was dress casually. It was really hot tonight, and but I also wanted to thank everybody for the petitioning work in the first place. We did a lot of petitioning this year. We had to get Biden on the ballot, and the delegates. You guys did that. We had the best. We got everybody on the ballot more than anybody else. And then we had to do, the primaries. So and to get us regular, people on the ballot. So I really appreciate it. And I know it's a lot of extra work for everybody. And I appreciate your love and support and your good humor in doing this. And just there's always little stories on the road for campaigning. One was today when I looked up and the coffee cart guy had a copy of my flyer in his coffee cart because all the neighbors told him that I was really good. So that was nice. It was very sweet. And then I talked to Karina a little while ago, and she told me that she had knocked on the door of somebody who'd just gotten their mail. They had my opponent's flyer in their hand, didn't realize it, and said, "Oh, I'm voting for Joanne." So hopefully everybody else is that too. But again and again, we find that people don't realize there's a primary. I mean, some people say they'll vote for me, but they don't realize that there's a primary. I don't know why they think they're voting in June. So we have to connect the dots for people. And that's really the biggest focus we have right now, is making sure people understand there's a primary, there's an opponent, and we need you to come out and vote. So thank you again.
Yes. Thank you, Susanna and Joanne, and also I just want to give a huge thanks to the members of this club that really y'all are just real troopers. Clubs candidates come to us asking for our endorsements because they know it is boots on the ground. So it really, y'all are the ones who are keeping the story of IND alive. So I am just eternally grateful. But yeah, as Susanna and I mentioned, links to help out are in the chat. If you have any questions, reach out to myself, reach out to Susanna, reach out to Karina. And also, as I'm sure everyone here knows, our endorsed candidate, congressman for just about all of us, Dan Goldman, does have a primary as well. So if anyone wants to try to help out with him, try and do some visibility at poll sites as well, I have literature. If anyone needs literature, please just reach out to us. Honestly, we're probably just trying to get rid of it because I'm sure it's infested me, Joanne, Susanna, Karina's homes. Campaign literature, as I'm sure most people know, is like glitter. You just never get rid of it. So yeah, we have an election night party, someday bar. So details will be sent out to everyone. And then those that are interested, there is, of course, the presidential debate on Thursday. We are a co-sponsor for a watch party. It's up in Harlem. It's being done by our friends at New York for Biden Harris, of which we're a member of the coalition there. The link for that is actually in the emails that was sent out, and also it's on our website. It's a mobilized link. I can't share the address because it's on RSVP. But if anyone has any questions about that, of course, just reach out. One last thing, sort of as a self-plug. So as I'm sure IND knows, it's already going to be very well represented at the Democratic National Convention. With Joanne, Alyssa, Carlos Calzadilla, all as delegates. I'm happy to report those of you that don't know, that I was actually chosen as an at-large delegate. So we have a huge contingent of INDers going to Chicago and voting to renominate President Biden. So with that, is there any other new business?
Move to adjourn.
Okay, motion to adjourn from Hal. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your evening.
Good night, everyone.
And of course, everyone, please stay cool and stay safe with this heat.
Please hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Good night.
That's right.
Good night.
All right. Thanks, Seamus. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Guys.